So again, good evening to everybody. So good to have you with us in this segment of Information Plus Hour. Tonight we are blessed to have with us Beverly Payne, who is going to facilitate this discussion. So Beverly, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and for this opportunity. I'm I have a little stage fright, but I'll get over it because y'all are going to talk to me, right, while we're doing this. My subject is Occoneechee Town. And few of us know about it and that it exists, and it existed. So the first thing I want to talk about is the discovery of my Indian heritage. And it happened in 1994. I was at home minding my own business. And Johnny called me. Some of you know him as Johnny. Some of you know him as John Jeffries, John Blackfellow. But anyway, Johnny called me. Asked me if I would come up. And, I always give him a hard time. So anyway, I do believe he came here and he brought Forrest Hazel with him. And Forrest Hazel is someone who I believe studied archaeology at UNC Chapel Hill. And he was a sheriff. He told me he was riding around, and evidently he must have been I don't know if he was Alamance County or Orange County, but he was riding around and he noticed that people looked different in what we call Pleasant Grove, which is now Burleson. And and Forrest is an old soul. He gets out and talks to people like old men did in the 50s, in the early 60s that I remember. And I don't know how he actually found out about the Occoneechee Indians and their trail from Virginia to there. But and their trail wasn't just to there. But anyway, he was pretty much sure of it because at that same time, or in 1938, UNC RLA, Research Laboratories of Archaeology, started looking for Occoneechee Town in 1938. They found Occoneechee Town in 1986. And and it's also known as the Fredericks site because it was owned, I believe, by Frank Fredericks, that property. And part of it was owned by, it is owned by Richard Jeanneret, who died, who left his property to American Classic Homes, which we know as Airmount in Hillsborough. So, secondly, how I found out, to be sure, because I'm one of these people that I want to know how it works. I want to know how you know and how they know till we get to the end of how we found out. So we had already found out in probably 1986. It could have been, I'm sure it was about around 1986. The park rangers from Occoneechee State Park in Virginia found us. So we noticed it before DNA. So they were tracking the people who were known to be Occoneechees with the last names of the settlers, the colonialism, or the settlers that came here. And they tracked us to Orange County. Now, back in the day, y'all, Orange County was huge. So Pleasant Grove, Alamance County, Person County, I believe, what is it? Caswell. A lot of counties were Orange County. So we all came where we are. And you just can't contain people, right? So we lived in different villages, which would, like we live today, like Kenny's family has houses. All his siblings have their own homes. Well, a home was a village. So we all lived in different places. Now, how I knew is that how I knew and was for sure is that my mama came from Pleasant Grove. Her mother was a Jeffries before she married an Akins. And her father. Now, this is how you get, you know how it's a mix in there? So but her father, my great grandfather was really a Cohen, Corn. And that was one of the original names, a few of the original tribal names. And his father, and he was, I don't know exactly where he was born, but his mother lived with a man on Highway 119 in Caswell County, whose last name was Baines. His name was William Baines. They called him Rains Baines. And he was white. Now, I don't know how, I do know this much, that my Uncle Gaston, whom my mother called Pep, was he was the son of Rain Baines and his mother. So his mother was an Indian, and it's said that she had 3 children, and he didn't want them to leave. So he said that he told them that if they didn't leave, he would raise the boys as white. Evidently, Gaston was the baby, and he went with his mother. We know nothing about the other 2, and we don't even really know if the other 2 existed. So that's how I found out that I was Indian, but not to mention that my mother and Johnny's father are probably something like 6th or 7th cousin anyway. Now, moving on, after the park rangers came to find us from the Occoneechee State Park in Virginia, because they wanted us to come up to the park and do things, and so we did go, but we didn't do anything right away because we were checking out histories and what one does. So in Indian Territory, and there were a lot of Indian territories, and Beverly showed you a map, and we were originally Virginia Indians. So this is going to be a little bit of history. Now we're moving into the history of the Occoneechee Band of the Saponi Nation, which it was not called that back in the day. In the 1600s, the Occoneechees lived on an island that's now covered by Kerr Lake. It was called Occoneechee Island for lack of, I guess, a better name at that time during colonialism. And we lived on an island that where the Roanoke and the Dan River came together. So in 1952, Kerr Lake, or the dam, was finished, and at that time, it was Occoneechee Island was covered by water. Now, before that, the state of Virginia excavated the island because, you know, Virginia is big on their Indian history. They are huge. Nobody that goes to Virginia doesn't know that there's not an Indian in Virginia. So, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. While we were in Virginia, there was a whole lot going on. We were, what I tell people all the time, we were the mafia of the fur trade. In approximately 1652, John Lederer was at the island. He saw the Okoneechis kill 6 Cherokee for trying to trade in their trading. And so I say all that to say that even up to today, when you're in a specific tribe's territory, you don't do anything unless you ask them if you can do it. You don't go in somebody's trip in, like I would never go into the Lumbee territory and try to do some Occoneechee stuff without consulting the Lumbee first or the Cherokee. So we ran the gambit on the fur trade from here to South Carolina, where our cousins, the Catawba, lived. And so there was something in Virginia called the Great Trading Path, sometimes referred to as the Occoneechee Trading Path, that went from there to South Carolina, where the Catawbas lived. And
hey, Beverly,
yes.
I have a question. How far up in Virginia did the Occoneechee tribe reside, or that you followed through? How far do you remember?
We were in present day Clarksville, Virginia, and it's approximately something like 67 miles into Virginia.
Thank you.
Glad you asked that. Look, Johnny taught me that. So, and
I have a question kind of related.
Okay.
So, are the Occoneechee recognized in Virginia as a tribe?
No, we're not recognized. We are not state recognized. I'll ask that question again when we get into recognition, okay? Because that's important.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Great Trading Path, roughly, it has other splinter paths, but it roughly follows I-85. And lots of things happened. Like there was a Bacon's Rebellion. Nathaniel Bacon was a colonist who was jealous of the fur trade, and he wanted it. He felt like there was a governor named Spotswood, and he had friendly tribes that were around him that buffered from what they call the wild savages. And so at some point, Bacon's rebellion, Bacon had he had other tribes. Well, there was one tribe that was a cousin of ours that was the Stuckanoks. And Bacon asked him to help him and his settlers kill the Occaneechi, and that happened. And we were so destituted that we could not keep our stronghold on the island any longer. And at that time, Governor Spotswood, there was a fort called Fort Christiana. And Governor Spotswood also built a reservation for the 5 remaining tribes. And it was said to be a stone's throw from Fort Christiana. And the 5 tribes were the Saponi, the Occaneechi, the Madamaskai, the Stuckanoks, and the Tutelo. Those tribes' children were taken from them, but not really taken from them. And they went to school at Fort Christiana. It's spelled Christiana, y'all, but it was pronounced Christiana. So at some point, and there was at some point, the Occaneechi would lead. There was intermarriage between all these tribes. The biggest tribe that was left was the Saponi. And that is why we all have Sapona last names or Saponi last names, which, we're the Occaneechi Saponi, the Halawa Saponi, the Saponi tribe, which used to be we knew them as the Person County Indians, but they took on the name Saponi. So we're all related. There's also the Wakamasuan. And so all our tribes were Suan tribes. That means the language that we spoke. And back in the day, it was called the Tutela language. Today, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm sure that Beverly Scholar can tell you what the name of the language is, because we went to a language conference last year and this year. So
can you say where the fort was located?
The fort is actually located, glad you asked, in Lawrenceville, Virginia. And it is a historical site. The only thing there left is one cannon. The name of our reservation was Junkata Passay, which is, in English, is the horse's head. We were on the river in the bend where it was shaped like a horse's head. Then let me see. So we are back and forth. And when we go back and forth to the Catawba tribe, now we don't go and come back in 3 or 4 months. It's years when we go and stay and come back. So at some point, the reservation was allotted to settlers. So the Occaneechi came back to Occaneechi town, but mind you, along the way to the Catawbas, there were different villages in different places. Like Occoneechee Town was finally found and excavated in 1986 through I believe 92. It could be 96. Right now, they are looking for what we call the other tribal name called Adashir. And it's somewhere in Duke Forest off of Irwin Road. They know that much. And this summer was their second year in looking for it. And how they look for it, y'all, is they go with post hole diggers and out in the woods and look for things that people like John Lawson or Richard Tanner wrote about. So anyway, so they move here and they become farmers. And so they're living in houses like everybody else. And, as time progresses, and one day somebody says that they look like Texans because there were three communities. There was the Pleasant Grove community, the Cedar Grove community, and the Oaks community. And they said they looked like Texans, people who were coming back from the war in Texas, the Indian War, some kind of war in Texas, where they were saying that we were looking like Texans. So Pleasant Grove, one of the names for it became Texas, the Texas community, Pleasant Grove, Little Texas, but it's the same place. And in fact, in an old map on Pleasant Grove, there is Texas. It says Texas rather than Pleasant Grove. Now, I'll just bring you back up to 1986 when they find Occoneechee Town. They know what they're looking for. Steve Davis is one of the archaeologists. He retired last year. It was the archaeologist that I know, and him and Vincent Stepanitis actually found and finished excavating Occoneechee Town. Now, it was called Occoneechee Town. John Lawson talked about it being Occoneechee Town, so that's why we call it Occoneechee Town. They knew what they were looking for as far as dated artifacts. And that's how they knew when they found it. And everybody lived near water because nobody was going to tote water. So they lived really close to the river. Now, when they found it and excavated it, there's a thing called a post hole map. I wasn't smart enough, so I will hold this up. But this is what a post hole map looks like. This big semicircle or oddly shaped circle is what the village looked like. And these are the post holes. These are all the post holes that they found that showed what we call a palisade, which is a fence. So, and inside there were more post holes for the housing. And then they found things like pits. There were pits for food. And when bugs got into that pit, they would close it up and dig another pit that stored food. And, down in the pits, it was pretty cool because they were at the river. So Yo, when I learned all this, I didn't want to know it. I wasn't interested. And I was interested. But as I get older, I'm a lot more interested. So, just so you know, in Hillsborough, downtown on Riverwalk, is a replica village of Occoneechee Town. It is a 2-scale model as for the Palisade, and it's 398 poles in that village. And then we built some housing. On this post-home map, there are 11 structures inside the Palisade. And they overlap. Now, the reason is so many dots on here, so many post holes. And I'm going to give y'all a website to go to look at this map if you want to. And it is, well, I'll put it in the chat later. So anyway, while all this looking for it and excavating is going on, the tribe is actually has discovered itself around the same time that Forrest came, and around the same time that the park rangers came from the Occoneechee State Park. So there are a lot of people. So let me tell you this: up until 1900, it was legal to shoot an Indian. So back in the day, during the Indian removal period, and a lot of you probably know that as what is it? As the Cherokee, as
Are you thinking about the Trail of Tears, Beverly?
Thank you, Beverly. The
You're
Trail of
welcome.
Tears. And but it wasn't just the Cherokee on the Trail of Tears. They were the biggest tribe. And they remembered who they were once they got to Oklahoma. But during the Indian Removal Act, a lot of Indians didn't get on the Trail of Tears. They hid in the swamps, or they passed for Black, or they passed for white if they could. And in my family, my mother, one brother, and another sister could not pass. But her other two sisters and the other brother could pass. And they did. Because it was scary. You could get killed for being an Indian. And probably by that time, I mean, they were having fun with it. So, the tribe, the people were getting together, especially in the Oaks community. And we formed a tribe, y'all, called the Eno-Occoneechee Indian Association. And a lot of things happened. A lot of bad things happened. That's how I got into it, because I wasn't going to the meetings. But Johnny told me one day, "You should have been at the meeting. So-and-so did this and so-and-so did that." And I said, "I can't believe people acting like that. I'm going to the next meeting." And I did. And at the next meeting, we got put out. So the tribe split. And we became the Occoneechee Band of the Supporting Nation. And we were trying to get, both of us were trying to get state recognition, both tribes. The Indian Commission told us that one of us, but not both, because we were the same people, we couldn't get state two tribes couldn't be recognized. And so we offered, so anyway, we had to sue the Indian Commission for recognition. So the state recognized us in 2002. And the Indian Commission did not recognize us. They let us know that they did not recognize us. And they said, this is the thing, y'all. The Indian Commission has been going on since probably the 70s or maybe the 60s.
I'll call you back, man. I'm in the middle of a meeting.
And so it's 8 recognized tribes now. 6 of those tribes were recognized by the state and then told that they could be the recognition committee. So they recognized the Meherrin tribe, said to go ahead and recognize them because they would not recognize any more tribes. They wrote that down. We got that. We had that in court. I mean, don't write anything down. Then when we tried to get recognized, they were not going to recognize us. It was really a battle. We started in, I believe, 1990, maybe 1992. It took us 12 years. That included going to court. And so meanwhile, they found the there are things, the 2 things that I remember most, the criteria that we had to meet, or 2 of the criteria that every tribe had to meet, was that you had to go back 200 years. You had to be able to take your people back 200 years. And you had to show community. And I know that that was at the time in state recognition because they were following federal recognition in some of the things. So we did that. There were 8 criteria. I think we met 5 out of 8. And some of the tribes that didn't want us to be recognized could not meet that. So life gets better. So now we're recognized. We're on friendly terms with the commission and other tribes. A lot of people who were defiant in us not being recognized are deceased. And I say that because we all are going to die. And for me, it's just a matter of at least doing the right thing. Now, in the meanwhile, the really, really, really good news is that they found Occoneechee Town, carbon dated, good stuff for the Occoneechees as far as being a recognized tribe.
What did the carbon dating reveal in terms of the age of the village there?
That the village is estimated to have been a living village from approximately 1689 to 1713 or 1710, 10 or 13. 1689 to 17. Let's go with 1710. And they knew what they were looking for. Now, what I haven't told you is that they found 3 other villages that kind of lived in that same vicinity and overlapped each other at different times. And the good news is that the even better news is that I asked, hey Renee, what were you supposed to ask me?
You answered it. It's about recognition in
Okay,
Virginia.
so
Yeah,
I
you
did answer.
answered it.
Okay, I did answer it. I just want to make sure. But y'all, I asked County Commissioner Renee Price one day, years ago, if the county would give us the land that Occoneechee town was actually on. And the answer was no. I tell you this today because the Archaeology Conservancy, which home is in New Mexico, is actually going to put that trust in land for the Occoneechee.
And just for clarification, I didn't say no.
No, I know.
Colleague said no.
I wouldn't have said it if you had said it.
And I asked again, actually, when the Genret property started changing hands and their mission, and then they gave they wanted the Eno River State Park or somebody to have conservancy over that land or custodialship. And I said to I think whoever it is that I can't think of her name now, Jessica or Jennifer that runs
Jessica.
Yeah. I said, well, why don't you just give it to the Occoneechee? And she kind of hemmed and hawed and then said that they were going to work on something so that they could preserve it.
Well, just so you know that the Occoneechee has 20 acres, and then they are also, the Conservancy is also putting, I don't know if it's minus the 20 or plus the 20, but they are putting 200 acres from the American Classic Homes into trust as well, which includes, y'all, what is now known, what used to be, before it was the Orange Speedway, the Occoneechee Speedway. So that concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions? I wish I had spoken better, but
You're great.
Oh, and another thing that I wanted to tell you is, in this book put out by the Eno River Association and Beverly and none other than Judge Beverly Scarlett, has a history of the Occoneechee on the Eno written by Lawrence Dunmore. And you can get these from Beverly, and I say these because there are 2. There is volume 1 with the history of the Occoneechee on the Eno by Lawrence Dunmore, and then there's volume 2 with my cousin Roger Hayes on it. And there are stories by Occoneechee, but there are stories by people of color in both of these books who lived on the Eno or played on the Eno or did whatever they did on the Eno.
Beverly, what was the website that you said you were going to share?
It is, I have typed that website a whole lot today. Let me see.
While Beverly is is coming with that website, I don't know if you're going to put it in the chat or if you're going to actually announce it, Beverly. But while you're coming with that, I have an overall kind of issue that I've had for probably more than 50 years now. And that is an issue with terminology. And I'll start by saying, anytime that you hear someone say the 5 civilized tribes, that's a problem. Because what you are saying in essence is that in order to be somebody, in order to be civilized, then you have to be close in terms of your level of civility to Europeans. And I'm always taken back when I hear, in some cases, scholars use the word the 5 civilized tribes. I mean, how degrading is that? To say that a group of people with whom you come in contact, destroy them, take their land, kill their people, and you refer to them as uncivilized? It is ugly. I've been playing with it and knocking it around for more than 50 years now. And the other word is Indian. I just don't use the word Indian. This is a personal thing. I absolutely never use the word. I will never refer to a human being as an Indian, because I know the origin of the term and how it was actually applied to a group of people. The same thing happened in Africa. You didn't have people on the continent that we now call Africa referring to themselves as Africans 700 years ago. You didn't have people in what we now call the United States or North America or South America or the Caribbean referring to themselves as Indians. And another term, of course, would be native. Those natives over there. And actually the word tribe, in many cases, when Europeans were using the term 150, 200, 300 years ago, it actually meant savage. And anything that was ugly or derogatory, those tribes over there. But you never hear anybody say the tribes of England, the tribes of France, the tribes of this. It not on the level that you hear it, and the meaning use of the word when you're referring to people who are other than white. It's just that I've heard people say the Germanic tribes, but throughout Europe, you will not hear the use of the word tribe as it relates to a people whom they believe to be inferior. But when we talk about tribe, when we talk about natives, when we talk about Indian, then why not use the word ethnic group? That's what I use. I've never referred to a group of people in Nigeria as the Igbo tribe or whatever the tribe may be. I don't call the Zulu people a tribe because I understand the connotation associated with the word for 500 years. And that connotation we perpetuate on a daily basis, I think, when we use it. Now, this is a personal thing. Y'all can continue using it if you want to. But for me, it is ethnic group. It is native to the land. Sometimes I have problems saying Native American because it's a name that was given to the people, to the land by somebody from Europe. So I got problems, got issues. I just want to throw that out there.
That's okay.
And I continue to play with it until my dying day.
A whole lot of people agree with you. Let me tell you a situation that I was in one time. We were in a meeting at Orange County, executive committee, and they kept saying the African American community this and the African American community that. And I said, well, what about the European American community? What do y'all think? Everybody's mouth just hung open. What do you mean European American? I said, if I'm African American, my ancestors are from Africa. Yours are from Europe. So do you have a problem with me calling you that? And a lot of the folks did, man.
Same concept.
Same concept.
Beverly Scotland. Okay.
Yes, I have a couple of comments. I'll try to keep them short. But Dr. Parker, you're absolutely right with the 5 civilized tribes. Based on my research, that terminology came about as a predecessor to the Indian Removal Act. And it was the larger tribes that the federal government knew that they didn't have the arms, military, whatever, to completely wipe them out. So they came up with this agreement that will either relocate you, do whatever, if you will become civilized, which means owning slaves, which means having a what they call a democratic government like the United States. I'm not so sure it's democratic, but that's my personal thing. And all of those tribes bought in and did exactly what the government said, except for the Seminoles down in Florida. As soon as they got rid of the feds, then they embraced Africans in their community as they had. And then the feds came knocking on the door, like, you breach your contract.
Closing up there for a second. Can y'all hear? You hear me? Wave your hand if you can hear me.
It is now.
Okay, so I don't know about y'all, but I lost, were you all out? I didn't hear anything for about a minute. And I froze up on this end. So
We're fine. We're fine.
We're good.
We could hear. Everyone else could hear probably.
Okay,
I could
good.
hear.
All right, good.
So the language, after we were released from Fort Christana, the language was referred to Tulo-Saponi, and then Yesa, meaning the people, language of the people. And now the new nomenclature is Yesa Sahin. And so that's the name of our language. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Beverly Payne to let you know that you moved me to tears. I know in my family history that I've wrote about, my mom was clear that nobody wanted to be called mulatto because that referred to being Indian or mixed with Indian, and everybody wanted the Indians dead. And if we were talking about 1900, it was still legal to shoot an Indian. My mother was born in 1923, and she's at the bottom of the line of 9 children. So that all makes it all makes sense. You know, they did their thing, but they wouldn't talk about it. And it's another reason, I'm sure, that Sally's picture was just put in the attic and not on display.
Yeah.
All right.
I would like to add to that really quickly before you say something, Sandra. All Indian tribes have a name that they call themselves, which means the people, but in their language. And that's what Yesa means in Tulo Okanichi. What is it, Yesan? Sahin. So with that said, that's what every tribe that I've ever been with, ever talked to, has a name that they call themselves. In every tribe, it means the people. So ours is Yesa, and it's on most of the shirts that I wear. Okay, Sandra.
I just wanted a couple things I wanted to say. I've seen a number of older maps that don't refer to tribes, but nations, because as you said, Dr. Parker, you're referring to people, and they were nations as well. It's just that the English and all that came here all the European nations ran these nations out of their territory. And I think that it's what I see, they were nations that we just exploited and pillaged and killed and ran off, and they basically were trying to survive and keep their culture and heritage. The question I want to ask Beverly Payne, in all that the research and history and work that you and your family have done, what do you see are the next steps or the future of what your work is?
Well, it's about working together as a nation. And you're correct about the word nation. I just use tribes because it's just easier to come out my mouth for some reason. But so as a tribe right now, I am glad to know, and you might be interested to know that, all these people who got COVID relief funds, all these entities, the governor agreed and gave all 8 recognized tribes COVID relief funds, except for the Cherokee, because they're federally recognized and they got it through the feds. So we meet every month. We have a village up there, because at some point, which is something I didn't say to anybody, I didn't even think about it, was the first, this is the second village, the second replica village that's been built downtown. The first one was built by John Jeffries, and people that he knew, and it took lots of people, and it took a whole lot less time than the one that we're working on now. But we had problems with the administration, with the Orange County Commissioner's administration, and we just took our village and went home and took it home. So there is a village. Our homeland is in Pleasant Grove on Deli Store Road, and there's a village there. We have a small tribal office with a museum of a lot of things that John Blackfeather reconstructed. He actually, this is something y'all might not know about him, but he made replica weapons and tools, Indian tools, for museums. So we have a lot of his stuff up there. And we have 25 acres. We bought 25 acres back in the late 80s, early 90s. It took us about 10 years to pay for it. And Renee, we still have to talk about that pipeline.
Well, we sent a letter. We all signed a petition.
Good.
I contacted Tony Hayes about it, let him know he's working on his end, but and even Amy, what is her name? Amy Gailey. She was the one Republican who was against it, but there's a lot of pressure to push it through, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, that's another time.
Yeah.
H.
Thanks, Beverly. Can you hear me? That was
Yes.
a good presentation. I want to agree with something with Dr. Parker about these words, Indian and African and all of that, because a while back, the good Judge Scarlett sent me a map. I think she shared it with everybody. I'll hold it up, but campaign is used on the bottom of that map. If you can see it, campaign is an organized course of action. And this map is a map of all the tribes up and down North Carolina, the Eno River, and all the Okanagan tribe. Whenever you see campaign used by the colonizers, that's purely designed to say that was a war that was perpetrated for the single reason of extermination of this culture. And I'm like Dr. Parker, if you're going to use words like that, then there should be some corrections across the board. And I agree, Indian, African, it doesn't matter anymore to me.
Jump in here too. Like Annie, I had myself my video off because I was stuffing my face and I didn't want to be rude. But I work at the museum and I create the exhibits. And so obviously what terms and words we use are incredibly important. And the first exhibit that I did with the museum was an exhibit on the Occaneechi, and worked very hard, interviewed a lot of tribal members to get the terminology right, find the words that they were most comfortable with, they wanted me to use. And in my signage and when we give tours, I am very conscious, in saying that, these are the terms that the Europeans gave and how these words came into usage. But unfortunately, there really isn't, any accepted terminology at this time. So there are, some people who you talk to and they find the word Indian very offensive. There are other people who find Native American, for just what was said before, we don't say European American, we don't acknowledge, aren't we all just American kind of thing. And so, there's indigenous, Aboriginal, there, it is such a tricky thing, and it would be lovely through conversations and discourse to find the common ground, find the best terms that we all are comfortable with, so that nobody does wittingly or unwittingly insult somebody and say something that they intend or don't intend to mean. So just wanted to let you all know, that this is something that we do take very seriously at the museum. And I know Annie can agree for what's going on at the Alliance. And it is difficult because, and I believe I talked to Dr. Parker about this before, is the term slave. Now it's becoming much more common to use the word enslaved. But I wonder, is that actually a better term when you start, changing some of the words to, we want to give agency, we want to, make it power. Are you then taking away some of the horrors, some of the nightmares, some of the struggle that people had to live under? So I just wanted to let you all know that, from our perspective here, that this is an ongoing conversation and something that we all want to get right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in and just second what Courtney said. And there are lots of calls and emails passed amongst the historic sites. And I contact UNC frequently on what their kind of verbiage is on things. And it is something that we try very hard to get right. And it's sometimes hard to know what the right terminology is. Because Freddie, like you said, I mean, there's scholars who use terms that they shouldn't be. And so sometimes it's hard to know which words should be used. But it is something that in Hillsborough, at least at the Alliance and the museum, we try very hard to use correct terminology, appropriate terminology, as much as possible.
I think the sad reality is that people don't even understand that there is an issue. And when you don't understand that there is an issue, it's even worse. But when you understand that there is an issue and do what Annie and Courtney are doing, I mean, you're trying to find the right terminology so that you won't offend people. And it's a tricky game. Beverly, for ribbons of color, we had a little issue with the word integration versus desegregation, capitalizing black, not capitalizing black, capitalizing white, not capitalizing white, and you know, and if your editor, I do have friends who have not gotten their articles published, and actually a couple of books published, because they refused to actually adhere to what the conventions were for that particular press, rather than use terminology that they believed was embarrassing or to the community that just didn't fit right. They said, okay, I'll go somewhere else and try to get this published, or I'll get it self-published.
I think you also have to consider generations. I don't work with, young people that much, but, I get invited to either participate in or to listen to various webinars. And, I listen to these 30-year-olds and 40, but basically I say maybe between 25 and, I don't know, 30, 35, 40. And they come up with their own, they have studied these different words and they have their own interpretation of what it should be. And for example, we were just talking about slave or enslaved, and some of them are adamant about saying enslaved, and or they might be adopting tribe because for them it means something different, just like for us. When I was born, I was Negro. And then I became Afro-American, and then it was African-American, and then it was Black, and then it was Black American. So, and then it was either or. And I had like my mother, she wanted to be referred one way. My dad liked another way. So I think, all of us, depending on where we come from and generational, the circles that we're in is going to determine what we say. And I just generally check with people if I'm going to speak or write something, how do you want to, what terminology do we want to use? And sometimes I put in both. Like when I was doing resolutions at the county level, I would just say Black, African American, and kind of because there were people that had preferences for both. So, but I really do think that we're going to see some differences just with the younger generations. If Danita was on here, she's still on, she could probably tell you because she works with young people all the time. But I've just noticed it with some of the webinars and panel discussions that I've listened to from around the country.
I have two young men, 42 and 39. And as long as you don't call them the N-word, it don't matter to them. It really doesn't. I can be African American, I can be Black, I can be anything but the N-word. And it really doesn't matter to them. And this is how they are. And they're smart kids, and they did well in college, and they're doing well in life. But, they really don't think about that a whole lot. Just treat me with respect, and we're going to be okay. And that's how they think. That's how they think. Just treat me with respect.
Yeah, Renee, I think one of those terms that the younger group has decided to use, I was doing a presentation on runaway slaves, down in Chatham County a couple of years ago, and the woman raised her hand and said, why do you use the word runaways? They were not runaways, they were freedom seekers. They were freedom seekers. Now, you're going to tell me that, I've been spending 40 years doing this, and I know that Charles did not run away seeking freedom. He's looking for his wife. And if he can spend one day with her and return to the plantation, everything is all right. He's not a freedom seeker. You can't, I think that you have to use the terminology that people used contemporarily. I mean, the bottom line is that when you use the word enslaved, a word that was not used 200 years ago, to describe a condition of slavery, you have to be very, very careful. The same lady stood up and said, you used the word master. They were not masters. Yes, they were. They were masters in every sense of the word. And these people were slaves in every sense of the word. And when we use terminology that somehow takes us away from that reality, trying to butter it up, make it sound like it wasn't, we have to be very, very careful about that. And so new terminology, some words I think okay, some words I still have problems with, but this is an ongoing, generationally, as Renee pointed out, the things that I believed 30 years ago, my professor said, man, you got to be crazy. So with each generation comes a different way of interpreting yesterday. And nothing is wrong with that, as long as it's healthy debate.
Can I ask then, because this is an issue that came up at the museum, and love y'all's feedback to see if I got it right. So we have a little basket in the museum, and there was the record that was, in our cataloging system and about it. And then there was the sign that the last curatorial staff had put in there. And the record that was written probably by, women in the 1960s, and the label in the case that was written by somebody, 5 years ago, the one from the 60s said that the owner of the basket was a slave named Aunt Maria. And then the one from a couple of years ago said that it was an enslaved woman named Maria. So I redid the sign, and I put back in the Aunt Maria because that's what she was actually called. She wasn't called just Maria. And also, again, my thought was that if you took the aunt part of it away, you removed the humiliating tag, and that people should read it and see that in there. But perhaps I was wrong. And so wondering what y'all think.
You're actually destroying history if you do otherwise.
Courtney, one question I have.
History.
Well, Courtney, one question I have with that is, your average person coming in, do they realize that aunt was a derogatory term at the time? It was applied to a lot of enslaved women. So do people know that?
No, and maybe I should put that on the sign.
Yeah. Because that's the only thing, at least for us, when we do stuff like that, it gets hard because we know it.
It depends on the context that is used. It depends on the context that is used in. I had Aunt Fanny, I had Aunt Sue, I had all of these aunts, and that's what we called them.
But
it was different.
We called them aunt. We didn't call them aunt.
It was coming from a different place. It was genuine.
Yeah,
it wasn't a stereotype. It was
right,
real.
and you didn't have to. They didn't have to be your blood relative either.
Most everybody that I call aunt was my blood relative.
No, but I'm saying, like, for me, I don't have any aunts or uncles. But if there was an adult, you did not call an adult by his or her first name. It was aunt.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Or uncle.
Or Mr. or Mrs.
Yeah.
That's the way we were taught.
Oh yeah.
Or Mrs.
Otherwise, you would have no teeth.
But it might be their first name. No teeth. It might be their first name or their nickname. Like Mr. Goatman, he was my dad's best friend. Well, we call him Mr. Goatman because
you had to say Mr.
That's right.
Yeah. And so it depends on how different people use it. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I'm
And you
saying.
can't do it just from the perspective of white people coming in there. I mean,
Nah.
some of
Mm,
us,
I
that
want
would have been Aunt Martha or whatever.
I want to say this about Aunt. Now, when I first went to in 1969 or 68, whatever year it was, I was in the 5th grade and I went to the white school. Everybody was talking about Aunt, and I was talking about my aunt, and they didn't understand. And I was like, so I mean, I knew what aunt was, and I finally told somebody that aunt was not a real word. And I got a lot of flack from that. But the teacher settled it. You know, aunt is a real word. It's aunt.
Rather than
But
Well, I think
rather,
everybody around here knows how aunt was used in racial terms.
Yeah.
If you
I
weren't
want,
or, you know, you called your real people aunt, uncle. But if you're not a person of color and you use that word in a setting where you had those people of color taking care of your children or taking care of your adult parent, you know what the word aunt means. So I
Mhm.
don't think there's any confusion about it. I think
Mm.
people now, there's still a big push on people identifying themselves. I work in the health industry, and there are people as far away as India, when you look at their information, they classify themselves as white. And so there's a lot of power with association of how you're defined. Someone from India with dark skin like mine is calling themselves white on paper because they're not in this country. So they're getting treated differently. And I see a lot of people who refuse to answer that question there. What is your ethnicity? Why am I going to be treated differently? So there's a lot of power and I'm just saying, someone who uses aunt in a derogatory term, well, you know where that's coming from.
Oh
That's all I
yeah,
have to say.
exactly.
Yeah,
now,
and also that would create even more division within the blacks and people who were slaves, because that whole nomenclature given to a slave meant that she had a better standing with the master's household than others. So it is indeed derogatory. And I wanted to say to Courtney when she was talking about everybody coming together on terms to be used, and particularly for Native American nations, I think the answer is to ask that nation, ask that group, and that's what it is. And you know, if others don't like it, they either get on board or, you know, we just have to tell them like it is.
I
Thank
also
you. I was gonna say, because that's what I did with the Okanichi exhibit, and so thank you.
So to go with what Beverly Scarlett just said, and Renee Price and Ken, it is all perspective. The way African Americans, blacks say or use language may be very different than how it's perceived or used in the white community or other communities. There's a whole sort of the dual use of languages, and the way we communicate is very different, and that's not always understood and very much misinterpreted. And if not done, used properly, or understanding that
That's right.
background, you're going to have a real issue. So
That's right.
you have to really take that into consideration with whatever you're doing.
I had to be one person when I was the Orange County Finance Director, but when I was hanging around with my family, I had to be a different person.
It's called code
About
switching.
terminology.
The whole code switching thing.
Preach,
yeah.
cousin. Imagine being a judge and having to do that too. Preach.
I know. You were harder than me. Yours was harder than me. But you have to do it, and because
And I think that
they're two
applies to
different
all
worlds.
different communities. All different communities have their own way of communicating outside of, quote, the majority view or on aspects, and they code switch too, whether it's Asian Americans, Native Americans, whatever you want to. There is a language that exists,
Yeah.
layered, that all the time is not interpreted appropriately or properly in the white community.
I had to adapt that dual situation to survive in my job. I had to do that.
Hmm.
Because
So just from what I'm hearing, just in terms of taking back to my question, then I kept the aunt in there. And you all, it seems like, you know, this is the historical record. That's what she was historically called. You know, we should keep that in there. The other thing I wanted to say was just in terms of the, you know, language issues. I worked on a project when I lived in West Virginia called Race Matters. And essentially it was this, it was just people sitting down and dialoguing, talking to each other, and you know, trying to bridge the gap and let other people know, hey, when you do that, that could be offensive, or this is why I say this is why I act that. And one of the things that we did through this project was there was a medical school in this little town, and working with medical students on, you know, who were, you know, predominantly, because this is a small town in West Virginia, so they were predominantly white, on, you know, how should you talk to your African American, Black American patients. And one of the biggest mistakes that young doctors make when dealing with, you know, found this out with African American patients, was in calling them by their first name. They thought they were doing that to put everybody at ease, but it was looked at as being so disrespectful. No, I'm Mrs. Smith, or I'm Dr. Smith. I've earned that. Don't you call me boy, you know, that kind of thing. And that it goes back to that. And so in trying to be all, oh, we're friends here, don't be afraid of your doctor, they were actually being very disrespectful and didn't realize it.
My father was the same way. He was Mr. Payne. And you didn't, if you didn't know him, if you were not his relative, he was Mr. Payne.
he was.
It was Mr. John. That's what he
So-
went by.
He
Mr. John.
was.
Hey, so was everybody in Morris Hill was Mr. and Mrs. in our neighborhood. What
Right.
did Tracy say?
That's
There was
right.
no Mr.
So-
There was no first name basis over there.
One of the other things that I wanted to say before we go is that indigenous on Turtle Island, which is what the continent is called. So we all have a card. We're the only people in the world that has a card they have to identify themselves with. That you gotta prove it.
Hmm. Any other questions, comments? Anything?
I have a question. So, Beverly, my thesis is, you know, like I said last week or the last time we met, Person County focused. And I'm really trying to, I want to understand, you called them, you called them the Person County Indians? I think is what you said they called.
Up until probably maybe 10 years ago, they were Person County Indians. That's what they were. That's what they would have been on this map.
Okay.
And now they changed their name to Saponi, Sappony.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if I want to understand how the settlers disrupted the Saponi, or I guess the Person County nation, or however, how would I, going back to this conversation on language, how should I just say Saponi? Because that's what they call themselves now?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
And then if I want to understand exactly how that happened, like maybe where they were previously living and then the disruption of settlers coming into that area.
So this is important. Any tribe in North Carolina that has Saponi with their name is part of that Lawrenceville reservation. They are
Before
one of the
Christ
5
Dana.
tribes
In
Mhm,
Lawrenceville, Virginia.
in
mhm.
Lawrenceville, Virginia. They were one of the 5 tribes on the Horses Head Reservation. The thing that there was no Saponi. I mean, there was the Sapona, Saponi or A, but there was no Halawa. There was no Wakama, Suan. Who else is on here? So just about, there are very few tribes, very few of the 8 recognized tribes in North Carolina that have those original names that are associated with the Sapona. So that was an important move. That was a strategic move for the Person County Indians to claim that name, because see, one of the original 5 tribes was Occaneechi. And because they had cousins elsewhere that they traveled to see, is how they were easily kept up with more so than the rest of the tribes that intermarried and kind of lost their real names. But another thing that I will tell you about real names is that during our court case for recognition, several of the archaeologists and anthropologists who actually were on the stand, one of the things that these are the things that I remember that they mentioned. They said that any tribe, reservations are made to, and you don't get a reservation out in a meadow with trees and a lake. You get reservations on the land that you can't live on. So they made reservations hard for you to live on. So one of the things that they said was that we are called Eastern Woodland Indians, anybody on this side of the Mississippi, because on the other side of the Mississippi becomes desert. So the Plains Indians on the other side of the Mississippi weren't Plains Indians because they were living on this side of the Mississippi. Once colonists started coming in, they started moving out west. They were living there, but they probably were out there for peace to get away, but they weren't living there. Mind you, they were coming back and forth.
Can I ask you something?
Reservations were designated, then they had no other choice but to live there. They had signed a treaty, they had lost a war, and they lived there, and they lived poorly there. There are still all the Sioux nations out in the Black Hills or in South Dakota. Those are the poorest people you ever seen. So when they're advertising to give money to poor people in America or over here on the East Coast, you go out there, they're suffering. The white farmers will airlift their cows out when it snows, but those indigenous people are still out there suffering. They freezing to death. They don't have any wood because you don't see trees growing. I mean, it's just hard life, and it's pitiful, and it's sad. And what I hate most about those commercials on TV is the SPCA dog commercial. There are people living like that. But go on to say, so those Indians that are living out there are living on reservations, put on reservations by the federal government. Even before the United States was the United States and the government was actually a cohesive government, the plan was to either annihilate or assimilate. And assimilation means that you would marry into and continue to marry into so that the race would not exist because they wanted the land. And sometimes when you're federally recognized, you do get land back. But now they've stopped giving land back because they know that they can't give land back and still live here.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Going back to Lawrenceville, Virginia, there was a HBCU there called St. Paul's College. Were they connected in any way?
Actually, Kenny, I've never heard of St. Paul. I have heard of St. Paul's, but I don't know anything.
It was in
about it.
Lawrenceville, Virginia.
Right.
I've been there several times, but it doesn't exist anymore. It was one of
Really?
those private HBCUs that didn't make it because of finances. But I mean, it was interesting that you said Lawrenceville because it's right there, and Lawrenceville ain't New York, so Lawrenceville like Hillsborough. So
Right.
it should have been a connection there. So I don't know.
So Kenny, to answer your question, and I don't have the full answer, I'm sure that there's research showing that the Black community, that even the enslaved people were working with the Native Americans when we were housed at Fort Christiana. And I can find that and get it to Freddie so you all can take a look at it. And it even points to Native Americans in that area helping Nat Turner hide out during the time he was on the run. So there was all of these interconnections because people were still trying to be who they were, even to the point of marrying who they wanted to marry. You know, you didn't tell indigenous people who they're going to marry. You know, the women had children with whoever they wanted to have children with, and the parents didn't even have any say on it. But that was one point. The second point, if Beverly will allow me to add, is that when the when the fort closed at Fort Christiana, and thank you for that pronunciation, I didn't know that before tonight, then we were all supposed to be changed. You know, you cut your hair, you wear European clothing, you forget your original language, and you go out and you become somebody other than someone from an indigenous nation. The whole point was to Christianize us, which basically means erase your history, which basically means that the federal government erased Occoneechee Island when they pulled Carr Lake right over it. So the erasure process is continuing to happen. It's everything we can do to maintain the sense of who we are.
Great
I
point.
heard that, but I mean, how does that connect to St. Paul's College?
So I don't know St. Paul's College particularly.
I do.
Yeah, no. I know of the college, but I can't say directly. That's why I started by saying I can't say directly, but I do know there was interconnection between Black-skinned people and red-skinned people.
Okay, cool.
Always had been in that area. And the example is the research that we have now, and even the research on indigenous people helping Nat Turner during his run.
Cool. Okay.
And even
I was just wondering because it was just one of those coincidences that just intrigued me. That's all. Because you know, I played ball up there twice when they were active, and it seemed like a lively place, and then all of a sudden they don't exist anymore. So,
How big were they, Kenny?
huh?
How big was the college? Or
It wasn't big. It was like smaller than St. Aug, and
Okay.
it was private. It wasn't in the university system, so they relied on a whole lot of donations and stuff.
That's the whole thing about private HBCUs. I'm a graduate of St. Aug, and if you don't get financing, you don't exist.
You don't exist. That's right. That's right. But it was a cool little place.
Yeah, we went up there a couple times, didn't we?
Yeah, I know. When you were at Winston-Salem State, I know you played up there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was like going to a different time zone. It was always, everybody was very nice, but it was definitely a different place.
It was indeed. But they were close.
All right,
If you
good
go
people.
to Lawrenceville now, once you get off the interstate, and just so people know, if you travel 85 towards 95, you will see the exit to Fort Christina. Most
You
people don't
will.
know what it is, but it's clearly labeled. If
Yeah.
you get off there and you drive into Lawrenceville, you will swear you have gone back 50
Back
years
in,
in time.
going
Yes,
back in time.
back in time.
And they will know you're from out of town.
They
will.
will know you're from out of town. They probably know every car that comes through there.
Yeah.
Well, Beverly, I want to say that I, enjoyed your talk, even though you said you had stage fright, which I don't believe. But I think it's important to keep bringing this forward. I mean, I keep trying to do my research. I've got a picture of my great-great-grandmother, but that's all. But it's important to keep it on the front burner, because stories like this, or not stories, but telling your story and these histories is important. I was just, it was just mentioned about, forgetting your culture and your language. Well, fortunately this year, the Indian Child Welfare Act, at least now, they're saying that Indian children or Native American children can actually be raised by Native American parents, because before they were taken away. But, now they're saying that, it's okay for Native Americans to intervene and to actually raise the children, and the children can go back to their tribes. So, and I think the more that people know that we're here, that it can't be ignored.
Grenada, sad thing about that is, in the context of DSS, it has to be a federally recognized tribe. If somebody had taken, Paige, she could end up anywhere. If Beverly Payne had a child and somebody said that she missed feeding her a day and the child ended up in the welfare system, that child would go anywhere. So it's really limited to federally recognized tribes, which brings up another issue for another discussion later. And that is the importance of getting all the benefits of federally recognized tribes. And, so many tribes are not. So just that one benefit you don't get.
I know, but at least it's a beginning, because I've run into that with something else this last week, where federally recognized tribes. So what I'm going to do is go back and say, you wanted more information from me, more opinions, and I'm going to tell them you need to also, as you're doing all this environmental stuff, you need to talk to state recognized tribes as well, because all of their statutes were all just for federally recognized.
So this happened a couple of years, well, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. The state did come to us, come to the Occaneechi. They had a Indian child. It was a federally recognized Indian child that they took out the home, and they put it in an Occaneechi home. And the same thing happened in California, where one of our people were fighting, and their child was taken out of their home and put into a federally recognized Indian child's home. So it's not necessary. It depends on who you're talking to. just like I had a cousin that lived in California and she needed some help, and I said, go to a reservation or and ask for help. They actually contacted us and wanted to know if she was actually a tribal member, and then they helped her. So that's what the feds say, but it's not necessarily true, depending on who you're working with.
Well, that's good to know, Beverly. And so for Renee, I think that needs to be clarified with the DSS legislation, because, you know, that's the court I ran and maintained exclusively in 2 counties for 5 years straight. And if that child is not connected to a federally recognized tribe, it will not go to the home of someone in a federally recognized tribe. They screen them. They teach us that in judges school. So yeah.
Yeah, I get all of that. And this was federal legislation. It wasn't state, but it was something that they asked us to sign on to, just to push it, to at least get it going. Because the way it was like, we're just going to take these children and completely remove them from their culture and their people. And what I'm saying to Beverly Payne is just how important her story is, because it may be incremental changes that are made, but at least we're opening the door, because there's so much more that we have to do, because, you know, for the past 300, 400 years, you know, European Americans, and I use that term a lot. I get some I was raised, but I use it all the time.
I use it all the time too.
Yeah. So, you know, it's going to take time, but, you know, I'm just saying what things like, you know, Beverly's story, I think, help with that. And we just have to keep pushing, just like we have to do for African Americans.
Keep pushing. It takes time, but look how much time we've already lost. So I'm pushing even more. I mean, the sad thing is, it's just the perpetuation of the apprenticeship system that they had, you know, back from the 1600s through the 1800s. You know, they were just taking free children of color from their parents, placing them with white people. You know, it's the exact same thing. Erase the culture. You know, work them as slaves, do whatever, because I can. And so that's why I'm pushing. I'm gonna keep pushing.
All right, good people. Let me make one announcement, and Renee might want to weigh in on this as well. After about 20 years, the North Carolina Freedom Park will officially open on August 23rd. It is something that we've been struggling and straining to bring to fruition for, like I said, about 20 years. And so I think for those of you who have not kept up with it, if you will go down after the 23rd, you're going to be amazed at this wonderful site that was actually done by, it's right. Renee, tell us exactly where it is, between the legislative building and the archives building off of Jones Street.
In Raleigh.
Yeah.
Raleigh.
Yes, in Raleigh on Wilmington Street. If you're on Jones Street, for example, facing the legislative building, it's to the right, and you can see it. It looks nice, even if they haven't done ribbon cutting at all. You can see it. I've been watching it as they've been, you know, working on it. The dust is clearing. It's quite impressive. It's sad that I think Phil Freelon was the designer.
Yeah, and he's passed away.
But, yeah, but it is beautiful.
Yeah.
So that ribbon cutting is next Wednesday, the 23rd at 10 o'clock, essentially by invitation for the reception and the actual ribbon cutting. But anybody can go in after that. I think that lasts from 10 until about 12. So,
and it's called Freedom Park?
Called Freedom Park, North Carolina Freedom Park.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the board of directors came to Hillsborough back in March and made a presentation down at the where do you all meet, Renee? Where is that?
I've argued in that
Wooded
legislature.
building.
But in building, yeah. So it was nice presentation, but they thought maybe it would be October, but as it turns out, it is ready now.
Too bad
Yeah.
the budget's not ready now.
Yeah, that's sad. It's another. Maybe you can come back, Renee, one day and talk to us about that. Okay, so we are on tap for September 12th for our next presentation. And the facilitator is Mona Shanklin, Dr. Mona Shanklin, who is Joe Shanklin's better part, third. She's going to, she actually taught up at Norfolk State for a number of years, maybe 20 plus years. Taught at NCCU for a number of years. And she's going to be bringing us some great information. I'll get something out about that a week in advance or so before the actual presentation. So we're looking at Tuesday, September 12th, rather than September 14th. All right.
One point, I wanted to make a comment. I've been getting a number of alerts for anyone that has to drive out anywhere or tonight or tomorrow. I guess the roads are very hazardous in Durham County.
Oh,
These
yeah.
Yes.
It stormed while we were talking again.
So I've gotten about 4 alerts here.
Yeah.
So they're saying if you're in an accident and it doesn't involve, life-threatening, the police probably won't be able to assist you.
Yeah, Sandra, there are trees down and there are power lines down all over the place.
Well, just stay where you are. You got to go nowhere. Just stay where you are right now.
Oh, I'm good.
I don't plan to go anywhere.
I'm good right now.
Are you in
Durham
Durham?
Huh?
I'm in Durham County, but it's a Chapel Hill address. But I get Durham County alerts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Any August birthdays?
I'm in the heart of Durham, so.
Any August birthdays? Nobody born in August?
My son was last week, so.
Okay. You born last week?
Yeah, I just want to tell.
His birthday was last week.
Yeah, I just want to tell Beverly I enjoyed the conversation. I was talking to a contractor on the side here. I apologize, but I mean, this was a great discussion in regards to politically correctness in terms of, it's all about who has power in terms of what we have to say a lot of times and how we say it. I know with regard to my presentation on African art, they didn't even have a name in a lot of the countries and for art. So, I mean, people have put labels on everything and like you said, tribes and all this kind of stuff. It's all about power, really. Just like the value of your piece of African art is dependent on a European provenance. It doesn't make it any less valuable if you got it from a tribal group or indigenous, whatever you want to call them. But unless it has a European provenance, then it's not going to be as valuable. But anyway, I just wanted to say that and that I enjoyed the discussion. I look forward for all of these. And, I had a lot of people, we grew up on the, our family, my legacy is down there as well. And there were a lot of Native people who could have similar ancestries to yours, Beverly, including my great grandmother, who I have a picture of her right here. And you can just look at their skin colors. You can just kind of see how things got out over the years, how we changed, and did not maybe disclose that part of our being. So it's always good to hear what you have to say. And I know everybody on this call has some kind of similar kinds of stories to tell. And this is just a great place to learn and to exchange information. And so I thank everybody. Thank you.
Been down on the river, bro.
Beverly Payne, thank you.
Jump in and say one more thing. Sorry, maybe too much, but just something that came to me, after all of this, and it just crossed my mind in terms of taking this broader. But you had mentioned in terms of the derogatory use of tribe and how it's used for Native Americans and for Africans. And then I also thought then the 12 tribes of Israel. So again, like I never thought of that as being a, derogatory, demeaning use. It's something in the Bible, but Yeah, I'm
But
thinking in a whole new light.
But I have Jewish friends that they embrace that.
Yeah, well, as I said, I always like,
what is
Depends on the group.
right.
Absolutely depends on the group. Courtney, is it okay at this point to announce the January exhibit?
Heck yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Sure. So Gerald Shanklin has very, very graciously agreed to have an exhibit here at the museum. We're gonna have an opening recession. I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's somewhere around it's like January. It's in January. I think we decided that the 12th or the 19th, I can't remember, I have to double check. It's a Friday, and that it'll be up for a month at least. And he's also very graciously come and visited the museum and said that he might even make a few masks, especially for the exhibit. So we would
Awesome.
looking forward to doing this, to telling the story of his collection and how he started collecting the masks, what they mean to him, and then his process of making masks.
Congratulations, here. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is my first
Excellent.
meeting. Thanks so much for the invite. This was awesome. Thanks you so much to you guys are doing some fantastic work. So
Thank
I
you.
look forward to future
Good
meetings.
having you.
Thank you.
You should have
Thank
been
you.
here earlier, like 6 months ago, but something happened with the communication there.
This
Well,
is
you're
right
here
up
now.
my alley. I love this.
Great,
I love
great.
it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to say something else. Sandra, you asked me what were we doing as a tribe or as a nation. We are actually, we put a letter of intent in the 90s for federal recognition, and we were moving towards that. Takes a lot of money. And since then, things have changed, criteria has changed, ways to acquire federal recognition has changed. So right now we're just living and thinking about it and talking about it and doing things for the people, like our service areas or the counties that we encumber are, Alamance, Caswell, and Orange. So, and we have over 2,000 members who live all over the United States. So one of the other things that that I didn't get to say or talk about was names, Indian names, or names that we perceive to be Indian names today. One of the other things that the archaeologist talked about was saying that none of the names that we know as Indian names are Indian names today because of those European Americans who came over and couldn't pronounce the names or didn't care to pronounce the names. And so the names have been lost in history.
So, Beverly, thanks again for an outstanding presentation. Absolutely wonderful. You didn't seem to be nervous at all. You came across beautifully. And Annie, I will pull together maybe for next week a lunch group. This old Hillsborough crew tries to get together at least once a month for lunch. And we're going to continue to do that until we get old. So I'll send something out.
So forever, because none of us are gonna get old.
Okay, good.
You could say that. I know.
Andy, you're only 12.
That's right. I am only 12.
I'm a realist. And it happens. I just thought getting old would take longer.
Yeah. So lunch one day next week. Okay, everybody. Look forward to seeing you on the 12th. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Beverly, thank you so much.
Thanks, Beverly.
Oh,
And I got something. I went to the a longhouse when I was up in New York, and I brought some materials back for you. They did a wampum display.
Okay.
Just a brochure.
Well, we need to talk, you and I.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Freddie,
Yes, sir.
Lunch is going to be on the 12th?
No. I'm saying lunch one day next week. The next Information Plus presentation is September 12th.
Well, okay, but lunch is gonna be next week.
Yeah, right. Can't miss that, right?
Yeah.
Got that.
Can't miss it, cause you paying, right?
All day long, paying attention.
Me
Take
too.
care, everybody.
All
Bye.
right, good.
Yeah.